protection process that exist within the MPIO roles. For those that many of you are long-standing volunteers on committees, but nevertheless there may be people that will watch this forum or be on the call tonight that are new into a role on a committee or a voluntary organisation. We'll have a quick cover content on blue card requirements, and I'm sure there may or may not be questions regarding what those requirements are for incorporated associations, such as all our clubs for the most part in Queensland. And we'll also just very quickly cover off and answer any questions while we've got you all about medical safety and medical service providers with the new EA processes that were implemented in 2021. Next slide, Mel, thank you. Most of you, I think, have been on our club forums before, so just a couple of tips and tricks on the sheet on the screen there for you. So please, if you can, mute yourself whilst people are talking, but please, we encourage you to unmute yourself and ask questions. As Mel said, it's informal tonight. We're very open to receiving questions, but use the chat functionality as well. Mel is driving the presentation plus watching the chat functionality. So if you put a question in there, feel free to raise your hand through the functionality as well. We will record, as Mel said, but equally it's more so just so other participants who can't join us tonight can still listen in on the content. If you are asking a question, introduce yourself, because many of you probably are using mobile phones and may not be able to see who's speaking. So always makes it a lot easier for everybody. Use your camera if you wish to, but don't use it if you don't want to either. Very open for us. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome and thank Brooke Irvine, who's joining us. Brooke's the integrity manager with Equestrian Australia, was appointed last year. Brooke works in that role in a part-time capacity, so is leading obviously the driving implementation of this framework, and I guess has very kindly agreed to join us tonight to, I guess, provide you all with the big picture overview, but we'll probably dive into some of the more specifics, but I guess share with you the journey that EA is on regarding the integrity framework, and Brooke, myself and Mel will answer any questions. So Brooke, thank you very much, and I'll hand the floor over to you.
Amazing, thank you. Thanks everyone for having me here tonight. Mel, maybe we'll just go to the next slide, please. So just, I guess, some information about the National Integrity Framework. This is a framework that a number of sports are starting to adopt. EA is, and equestrian is one of the first sports to adopt the National Integrity Framework, specific for equestrian. So within the National Integrity Framework, there are a whole series of policies that sit underneath the framework itself, as well as a complaints handling process as well. So whilst we have the new National Integrity Framework, we also have obviously complaints that will sit outside of the framework. So anything that doesn't sit...
State has cancelled a scheduled meeting with his Russian counterpart.
Within the member protection policy, with the child safeguarding policy, the competition manipulation and sports wagering policy, and improper use of drugs and medicine policy. If your complaints sit outside of these policies, then it won't be part of the National Integrity Framework, and we will be managing those complaints separately. So we are still working on a policy and a process for managing complaints that sit outside of the National Integrity Framework, which obviously will be released hopefully in the next couple of months. If you want to just go to the next slide, Mel. So this might just explain it a little bit more in detail. We have the National Integrity Framework, which sits over all of these policies. We still have running concurrently the World Anti-Doping Code, as well as the new anti-doping policy. So this is to try and capture those athletes who may sit outside of the anti-doping code and within that high performance pathway. This was to capture some of those athletes that sit at a recreational level as well. So as we mentioned, the member protection, child safeguarding, competition manipulation, wagering and improper use of drugs policy, they're all supported by complaints, disputes and discipline policy. So that's how we manage those complaints. Essentially, any of these complaints will go direct through, perhaps Mel, the next slide has that detail, I think, from memory. They will go through to Sport Integrity Australia. So anything that sits within those policies that may be a breach of the codes of behaviour, a breach of any of those policies, then they will go through to Sport Integrity Australia, and Sport Integrity Australia will look at whether it fits into the prohibited conduct or whether it is something that the sport need to manage that sits outside of the National Integrity Framework. And again, we do have policies in place such as the discipline bylaws, such as the social media policies and things like that, that we can manage them now, but we are looking to review all of those policies so that they then fit within a new complaints management policy if a complaint comes back to the sport and sits outside of the integrity framework. So I know it's all very confusing. I would suggest, if in doubt, please don't hesitate to contact myself or Lisa Pogson, is our complaints manager. She's new as well, just came on board at the end of last year also, and we would be happy to walk you through the process. If you believe that a complaint sit within the framework, then you can either go onto the Sport Integrity Australia website, fill in the complaints form. They will do an assessment of the complaint and come back to you with a determination of whether it sits inside or outside and what process they'll take from there. There's also a hotline, so a 1300 number that you can contact as well if you've got questions from that point of view also. I think probably one of the key things, there's also a new section on the EA website, which is EA Integrity, and that will give you more information about the integrity framework as well as what is prohibited conduct. So there is a brochure flyer in regards to prohibited conduct, and if it fits within the prohibited conduct, then it would go to Sport Integrity Australia. But the policies have a lot more detail. The PDF document brochure that we have on there gives you a high-level overview of some of the behaviours that may sit within a breach of the policies from that point of view as well. So I think that's pretty much an overview. If anyone has questions that relate to the integrity framework.
Feel free to unmute yourself if you've got a question, or pop something in the chat function if you want us to be anonymous.
Well, while we're waiting on any questions or people are unmuting, so just to reinforce what Brooke has mentioned there is, so obviously there's the framework provides a mechanism to deal with, you know, complaints and matters that sit within that framework, and it is an independent process. EA and through the state branches, if they don't sit within those matters, the jurisdiction still sits within, you know, the club level. But I guess the circumstance is that if a matter can be resolved at a local level with the parties directly involved themselves, that's always the best first port of call. But if the matter sits within a matter that can be dealt with the integrity and the framework, that.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, having a
independent process, and as Brooke said, I think I saw it, and EQ would be certainly happy to assist any club when first assessing whether a matter potentially sits within the framework or not.
And we will be working on more communications and education over the coming months as well, so that we can better explain this to members across the sport. Also, Sport Integrity Australia are working on a series of resources, particularly for clubs as well, so posters and brochures that you can display in your clubs, around stables, wherever is appropriate, as well as information that you can put on your websites and things like that too. So we'll be working on a series of those over the coming months as well, just to help roll it out and let people know where to go and what to do.
And with what Brooke's mentioned there, another piece that EQ will also look at in consultation with EA and through their relationship with Sport Integrity Australia is that hopefully we can actually give some practical examples to say, here's the scenario of a matter that could be dealt with by the integrity framework, or a matter that may be dealt with outside of it. And as Brooke mentioned, I'm sure many of you from time to time have come in your roles as club officials or event organisers have had something on social media that's been posted by, and I guess as a clear example, the NIF framework is not the responding mechanism in that circumstance, but the EA policy currently, which Brooke alluded to, is being reviewed. But I mean, as a club, at a club local level, you have the ability to ask the member to take the message down. To share context from an EQ perspective, we do ask from time to time from our members to rephrase or take down of social media. It's the perception of what they post and their perception of it by others, but others can perceive it a different way. So sometimes context is key, and we have done that in the past. So that's an example where if you can ask the question, best to know. Oh, did I cut out, Mel?
Yes, but that's okay. You're back again now.
Sorry, my internet is a little bit patchy. Everyone, sorry. I'm in with a little bit of rain around. I'm in a susceptible area. Any questions from anybody?
No.
Very good. Well, Brooke, if you're happy, what we might do is just share your details and Lisa's, but equally we will encourage our club affiliate, noting that there's only 2 of you in the EAO office. We will certainly advise our club and affiliate organisers that they can come through EQ, but equally you are both available for advice and potentially getting some direction about how to deal with the matter when they first come up through this new framework.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, you're more than welcome to stay. The next slide that, or I'll let you get back to your Wednesday evening as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brooke.
I'm happy to stay for the next few, just purely because they do fit really well within the integrity framework from that point of view as well. So.
Well, yeah. That might fit very well, Brooke, particularly if my internet's a little bit patchy. So briefly on this slide, everybody, is just a reminder about member protection information officers. So again, a lot of you on the call are well experienced. So we strongly to have an identified member. Cover that. Are you comfortable to talk through it?
I will have a quick chat because your internet is decided it's going to hit a dodgy patch there. So an MPIO, they can be somebody that within your club, a non-committee member within your club, or they can also be an independent person from even a different sport. EQ has a number of MPIOs as well. The role of an MPIO, as it is on the slide, is that they're the person that provides information to the complainant about their rights and responsibilities. It gives them options on how to make a complaint if they want to, or raise a concern, and the MPIO will support them through the process they're not somebody that actually handles the complaint. They're just somebody that helps you, I suppose, negotiate the red tape. So we definitely encourage, especially larger clubs, to have an MPIO on their as part of their management structure, or at least have somebody they know they can call upon. Some of the smaller clubs, it's not as easy, but we've certainly got MPIOs at EQ, and you can have an MPIO from an independent organisation as well. Did you want to add anything else, Brooke?
No, I think that's great. I think as an MPIO, guiding someone through the process and what the next steps are, that's where it becomes important to know what the policies say, so that you can provide that advice to the complainants and or respondents as well, if they're concerned about what does this mean, where is it going. Actually knowing the policies and the steps in the new policies is quite important to provide that advice.
I did pop on some information on the next slide, which is Play by the Rules is an excellent website, and I've included a link in there too, so that when you get this presentation via email, when it goes on the website, you can quite easily click on these links and follow them through. You can do an MPIO online course, and like we said, Play by the Rules has got a lot of great resources available to clubs, but they are the people to go to when it comes to MPIO and training. So that's who, and I've included that link there, so you can just jump on if you want to. I'm not sure how Briston's internet is going. He was going to briefly touch on the EQ complaint process, but I think he has already sort of covered that off a bit. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that, Briston?
I've turned my camera off, so hopefully my internet is a bit better. So the only thing I'll add to, probably in addition to obviously the complaints process that EA are working on, is the advice that and how we respond at EQ when we receive a complaint from a member of the association. Is our first question is effectively, what is their expectation in regards to the outcome? So what are they looking for? And so I guess that then first guides us to say, irrespective, we go through a process to inquire further, particularly if it fits within our mechanism to respond to. But again, that's often a very useful tool for many of you that from time to time will have to deal with a complaint. Sometimes, again, there'll be people that you know particularly well, or people that you may not know so well, but are still, part of your club or attending your events. So that mechanism and early, and I guess what we equally all acknowledge is that this is a continuous improvement process. So with the support from Sport Integrity Australia, with the processes that EA are developing, equally EQ will be developing some process flow charts to deploy out to our event organisers to effectively give tools to say this is how a matter could be dealt with without prescribing it word for word. So we acknowledge that it's a space that we need to provide better support to all our club affiliates. And hopefully, for the most part, matters can be resolved at the first point of contact, but we can assist and have a reference point either through us or through EA or through Sport Integrity Australia. So thank you, Mel.
Great. And we'd also like to take this opportunity just to briefly touch on Blue Card and the requirements and responsibilities around clubs. There are lots of different scenarios. So I took some information off the Blue Card website. Number one, if they're under, if you're running a youth or junior athlete specific event, then under the Queensland Blue Card requirements, those that are part of that event or on the organising committee should have a Blue Card. There are exemptions in regard, and I'll go on to that into the next page. I included the table here, and it gives you an idea of sport and active recreation. It gives you an idea of who must have a blue card and who will not require a blue card. So if there's a volunteer supporting athletes at a junior swimming meet, because it's a junior swimming meet, they must have a blue card. And a personal trainer who's engaged by a parent to perform one-on-one personal training sessions to their child. So once again, it's a one-on-one session with a child only present. That a blue card is necessary. If it's a volunteer and it's an event that is a mixture of adults and juniors, it's not necessary to have a blue card. Same as if it's access to the general public. So I've got here an outline of when you don't need a blue card. I wanted to highlight specifically that it says that the requirement is if you work more than 7 days in a calendar year. Well, when I say volunteer more than 7 days in a calendar year. So if you have a one-off event, then a blue card may not be required by by your volunteers that are attending. However, if you've got committee, EQ already highly recommends that all committee members of all clubs have blue cards. I'm just going to let somebody in, sorry. But if you are running a youth specific event, and especially if there's the opportunity for the kids to get dropped off with their horses and the parents leave the event, then it is necessary for those involved to have a blue card. For your reference, as a club member, all EQ officials, stewards and coaches all have blue cards as part of their accreditation process. Doesn't necessarily mean that their blue card is current. It was current at their time of renewal. We don't always continually check. Well, I know for my role looking after interschool, I do check every interschool event, every official and steward that we engage, that their blue card is current. But they definitely have to have a blue card to receive that accreditation in the first place. And it's really important now to understand that blue card, you must apply to have your blue card renewed before it expires. You used to be able to do it after it expired, but now no card, no work. There's no start. I think they call it no card, no start. So it's really important that you're renewing your blue card before its expiry date. So just keep an eye on that. Pop it in your diary and a reminder in your phone when you're 6 weeks out from your blue card expiring. It is all now online too, your blue card. So it goes through the blue card services portal, and it hinges on your license. Okay, so it asks for a CRN, which is your license number.
And just to add a little bit there, Mel, for context to add to that, is so as Mel alluded to, if you are as a club or affiliate engaging officials through your events or coaches for activities, all those individuals have had blue cards. We do annually do the compliance check, but as Mel alluded to, there might be our systems are getting better. So hopefully, moving forward, we actually have notifications to say if someone's blue card has expired, yet we haven't actually updated the details that we've asked of that. From a personal experience, if you have those that have blue cards, mine actually expires in May. I actually got a reminder email this week. So the blue card system is notifying people well in advance, and they are sending multiple emails to individuals. So realistically, the only valid reason for people not to get the reminder is perhaps your contact details, i.e. your email address has changed since when your application was first put in. So important to go and update your information as well as if you hold a blue card. Thanks, Mel. That's probably all I wanted to add there.
If as a club you have any questions in regards to the MPIO or the blue card, I know I say it at every club forum, but we are just a phone call away. Please feel free to pick up the phone, have a chat, pop a question through. Not necessarily be able to answer it straight away. Sometimes we have to put a bit of research into it, but we definitely encourage you to give us a call, touch base with us, and we will endeavour to get the right information through for you. Okay, and this is I think this is the last slide now. So we just also wanted to touch on the medical service providers and how that interacts with your activities and your events. We did do a whole safety forum last year, and that is available for access on the club's webpage. But we just wanted to touch base on this again, just to make sure that clubs and event organisers have an understanding of onboarding and inducting an MSP, especially prior to an event and at the event. So first of all, we want our MSPs, medical service providers, to be registered with EA, and I've embedded the link in this slide. It's pretty easy to find on the EA website as well. So it's a matter of supplying, before the event, ensuring that your MSP has got this link and has the opportunity to fill it out and register with EA. It means that they're up to date with EA medical requirements, and they have an understanding of what's needed so that EA can communicate with them. Now, on the day of the event, the MSP needs to be provided with a Form 8, which is an incident reporting form. Now, they are available either in a pad form or online. EA and EQ encourage you to lodge them online. We understand that sometimes the MSP doesn't have an electronic device or internet's patchy. So there is also a pad form that's in triplicate. If you would like one of those, again, that is a link. Click on there, it gives you the ability to order a pad. Whether you lodge the incident online or via paper, they will have a unique identifier. So it just needs to be lodged once, either way, and that incident will have a unique identifier. So there's a few different reasons listed as to why you'd use a Form 8. It's not just because of a fall. It could be a near miss. There could be something that you saw that you thought, wow, that could have really been nasty. And you can always pop that on a Form 8 as well. Not sure who someone's talking, got noise happening in the background. And also the Form 8 also needs to be completed if there's any serious incidences or an ambulance transfer. The Form 8 must be completed by the medical service provider that's there on the grounds. And if it is a serious incident, must be forwarded to the National Safety Manager within 24 hours. The email address is on the bottom of the Form 8, and it's also, I've included it here. It's pretty straightforward, reporting@equestrian.org.au. In the case of a suspected concussion or the transfer of the rider or patient to hospital, the Form 8s that come in triplicate can be, one of those can be sent with the rider or their entourage or next of kin that's with them. You can also, with your online submissions, you can include another email address if you so choose. So it's reported that way as well via online. Okay, so if there is a suspected concussion, this is one thing that clubs need to make sure they have access to a Form 8, whether it's in a pad form or it's an online form. They need to make sure that MSP has access to it. If you do have dodgy internet, I suggest the club purchases a Form 8. It'll last you a long time. Now, the one thing you will need to do is the Form 09A, then that's a concussion advice form. The MSP needs hopefully you won't use them at all, but the MSP would benefit from having a couple of copies. You need to print that off the EA website. That's not part of the Form 8 process. You need to print it off the EA website. Again, that's the link there so you can access it. Now, what it is it's a concussion. It outlines the concussion protocol within the EA and how that process works. So the concussion will actually be reported to EA via the Form 8, via that serious incident reporting by the MSP. And that will mean that if they are a EA member, their membership will be on hold. So they'll be prevented from nominating or being involved in riding in any events until they have full medical clearance. Now, that medical clearance then needs to be submitted to EA. So that concussion advice form lists everything that they need to. It gives that person involved understanding of how the process works, contact information, so that it's a really vital piece of information. But it is the event organisers and the club's responsibility to print that out and make sure an MSP has a copy of it. That can also apply if there's a suspected concussion. So if MSP determines a suspected concussion, then that's enough for that rider to have to sit out. And the other important thing is that it is the event organiser's responsibility to ensure that the Form 8s are emailed back to reporting@equestrian.org.au, and also CC in us, reporting@equestrianqueensland.com.au. And like I said, as soon as possible. So it's a serious incident, 24 hours maximum. If it's not a serious incident, then 48 hours maximum. We really like to get them in as soon as possible, so they're while they're in the forefront of our minds. I have got a quick question. This is only for EA members, isn't it? We have an incident involving a rider who's a club member but not an EA member. Can we not submit a Form 8? Well, there's nothing stopping you from submitting a Form 8. Certainly I'm sure in my conversations with Meredith, they want to have an understanding of everything that happens within our equestrian discipline. So you can definitely submit a Form 8. There will be no consequence from the Form 8 in regards to if there's a concussion or something like that. Obviously, we can't put a member on hold if they're not a member. But I would definitely encourage you still submitting a Form 8.
Can I add just to the question there, Ron, is that exactly, and it's more about, it's an incident log for a protection mechanism for your club. For example, if a claim from a particular person was injured at your club event, then you've got an incident log of the circumstances, because what happens is from time to time something can happen, and then it could be months, it could be years later. But obviously, if the incident occurs at the grounds of your club, and it's the club members, but particularly, I mean, a majority of our clubs, not every affiliate, is insured through the EA scheme, but it just will make the club's officers' life a lot easier, because you have a record of what occurred at that particular time and not having to trace back information and put together it after the fact. So again, as Mel said, strongly advise any incident at your grounds to be recorded, and even for near misses. And it's not designed to be burdensome, but it's effectively it's a record statement in time. As Mel alluded to, if there's a near miss and other pieces, it's a useful tool, because it can identify trends to say, perhaps, whether it's weather, whether it's parking or other things that can contribute to things that are occurring at one event or multiple events. So a really good tool to use. The other thing
we have got one more question there too, Brisbane, from Grant.
I'll answer Grant's question too.
Yes.
The other thing I'll quickly cover with medical incident reporting is one lesson that we've learned through the course of 2020 and 2021 as EQ is we regularly engage with a handful of providers, majority who support our events, but often they can be different people turning up because they are large scale companies. And it is critically important to have someone of your organising team induct that individual, because the company that you use may be regularly aware of what that process is, but you have someone new turn up who's new employed. Sometimes it's very confusing for them, understandably, because they might be at a pony club event one week at one ground and an EA club event the next week. So just, re-advising to them to say, we would ask you to do these forms. They're available in the paper copy if your club has a copy. We've got some in the office, so if you have an event coming up, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to support the provision of those paper-based copies, and strongly encourage every club to have one with you as a fail-safe. But the online reporting is the best mechanism. Grant, really good question regarding officials, and so this many people on the call would be already familiar, because a lot of clubs engage, whether it's an official or a coach from an interstate jurisdiction. And the question for everybody is, if you're engaging someone from, take New South Wales or Victoria, do you need to, as a club or an organiser, ensure that they have a blue card? So the short answer is the EA coaching framework provides effectively police checks, similar systems in other states. But under the Queensland blue card requirement, there is, if that person is engaging for, the exemption at the moment is 7 days, there is a current work rate that can be, there is a greater provision for a few extra days. But if they're interstate and they are accredited, at the moment there is an exemption. If they're providing, for example, a clinic at an event, and they are an accredited and they have a police check, it is not a requirement. But equally, we do strongly encourage still, if you're using that person regularly, that we actually facilitate a blue card application. Now it's not impossible, because it is possible for interstate people to have a Queensland blue card, but it does take some time because there's additional identification processes that need to occur. But as an example, if you're regularly using someone, 4 times a year at your club, best practice, and we're happy to assist. So if you need some advice as a club entity about how to get a source of blue card provision for a regular interstate official or coach that you're using, reach out to us. But we might provide some information about that too. I think there was another club there.
Just in addition to that as well, if they have a Working with Children check card, so blue card equivalent in New South Wales or Victoria, given that example, you can always ask them for evidence of that as well, because they've been checked in their state or territory, and having that information on file is also really beneficial, because you know that they have been checked within their state, and there is legislation when they are crossing borders for each of those states as well. So as Briston was saying, it's a 7-day in Queensland, it may be a 30-day in Victoria before they actually have to get the blue card or Working with Children check within the state that they're working. But there is also absolutely no reason you couldn't ask them for evidence of their Working with Children check card within the state that they reside.
Thanks, Paul.
And
really good.
Grant also mentioned on there, what if they are a non-EA registered coach? Well, the blue card still applies, because the blue card provision is not an EQ rule, it is a Queensland government rule. So they would need to supply you with a blue card. Obviously, there's more assurance there if they're an EQ accredited or EA accredited coach, but if they're not, then they should still be supplying you with a blue card.
Yeah, and probably a good comment, Mel, to say again, the EA coaching scheme and accreditation scheme, which is obviously highly supported by the state branches, and we don't, from EQ's perspective, when we're running any accreditation or coaching activities within our squads or high performance, we only use accredited people for our scheme, because obviously it's a system that we actively promote and use. We don't prescribe that clubs have to use EA accredited coaches. We strongly encourage, if you're applying for funding under our sport development funding for a clinic, then that person absolutely needs to be EA accredited. And I guess by the accreditation piece, you also have an element of assurance about the coach's insurance. If you're using people outside of the EA coaching stream or otherwise, you should be asking for, as Brooke said, not just copies of their blue card, but their insurance and other pieces, because, and it probably, not to overburden clubs, but it's probably worth making sure that their insurance is sufficient as per what any cover that the club is required to have under your insurance. So again, good practice. But again, we don't want to over confuse or complicate it for volunteers across clubs. So again, any questions in those scenarios, but again, using EA accredited coaches provides rigor and assurance around that process.
We've got another question here, Briston, which is, does this include first aid providers within the club?
Great question, Deb. So in short, anyone can be, so if you're accredited first aider, you can be still registered with EA as a medical service provider. And we strongly encourage you to, because you'll get information directly through the portal. We acknowledge, and I guess that for a clinic, as an example at a club, often it's the coach that is the first, because all our coaches, and again, that's another assurance piece. Any EA accredited coach has a first aid certificate. So they might be the delegated first aider as well in some circumstances. For larger clinics and activities, you might have a volunteer first aider. For any activity, it is important to make sure that person, if they are a volunteer first aider, that you as a club have a medical kit that is current, certified and in stock, and equally that person, it's their only job. So, if you are using a volunteer, but equally I know that EA are equally working on, but what we want to be able to provide some guidance to every club, particularly in regional areas, and which goes on to the forum that we had last year, is some guidance about how you should engage an external provider when, and again, in noting that there are some cost and also logistical challenges for clubs in regional areas about getting paid and/or volunteer services. But we strongly encourage any first aid provider, being voluntary or otherwise, to register and still always use the incident reporting forms.
There's also a app. I have to have a look on the EA webpage. I can't remember exactly what it's called now. That is a concussion that any layperson can use, and you can they can use to what's the word? Diagnose isn't the right word, but you follow the steps in the app, and it tells you whether there's a suspected concussion or non-concussion. So that's something that if you've got just a first aid provider at an activity, then I would highly suggest they have that app downloaded and they have the ability to do that.
That's the Head Check app.
Head Check. So that's it.
Yep.
Can remember.
All right, and apologies, Christine. I saw that was I saw Ron made the comment, but it was you, Christine. So thank you very much. All right, that's the conclusion, everybody, of the formalities of this evening. While we have Brooke, Mel, and myself, are there any questions from anybody else? Feel free to unmute or alternatively use the chat functionality. No. Well, thank you very much. 50 minutes of your time on a Wednesday evening, really appreciated. Brooke, thank you once again. As an action, everybody will send through just a summary, but obviously contacts for Melinda, for Brooke, for Lisa. So any questions regarding complaints handling or how to deal with it within the framework or otherwise, feel free to reach out, and we will just send some additional information linked to both the blue card advice and also the medical service provider piece. When will the recording be available? Mel, I'd say, is it a fair assumption to say that'll probably be up on our website next week? Mel, are you happy to know where it is? I'll let you talk to where people can find it. We might put that in the email to everybody as well.
I think that's ideal. Usually Olivia, our admin lady, does that for me, does all the technical, putting it up on YouTube, gives it back to me, and then I create it on the website, which is the easy part. But Olivia's off at the moment, so I'll see if I can muddle through. Otherwise, it might be the beginning of next week when Olivia's back on board. So I'll see how we go. But yeah, I can definitely link it in the email, and it goes under the club resources tab on the website as well. Okay, let me have a look. Think everybody else is happy? Great. Please feel free, if you joined late and you just want a quick little chat afterwards at all, if you've got any questions that you didn't want to ask in front of everybody, feel free to hang on. I've got another 5 minutes if you want to have a quick chat. Otherwise, See you later. Enjoy your dinner. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have a question at all, Debbie or Michaela? Debbie, did you have a question at all?